Hello friends, today I will discuss some basic concepts of income tax. This is relating to your paper income tax law and practices. Before we understand some concept, let us first decide or understand what is tax. Tax is nothing, it is a compulsory levy by the government on the income earned by its citizens. Then the question is obviously, why should I pay tax, or who are required to pay tax? When I say tax, everyone or every citizen is liable to pay tax, whether he is a beggar or is a rich person is required to pay tax. Then there may be a confusion in your mind whether why a beggar is required to pay tax. Yes, tax is not only income tax, tax may be direct tax or indirect tax. So when a beggar is purchasing biscuits by paying 1 rupee, that 1 rupee is inclusive of all taxes, that means including GST. So being a citizen of Indian, we are bound to pay tax as and when levied by government of India. Now another question arises, why should I pay tax? Why should one pay tax? You know, as all we are citizen of India, we are enjoying some rights, and these rights are given by the constitutions of India. That means we are enjoying some rights or privileges given by the country or government. Similarly, against that or in return to that rights, we have some duties. So paying tax is one of the constitutional duty of each and every citizen. Now there is another question in our mind, that why this tax is known as a direct tax and indirect tax. When I say direct tax, for example, income tax is a direct tax. When I say it is a direct tax, that means the person who is earning income is liable to pay tax directly to the government or to the income tax department. Here the incidence of tax is directly on the person who is earning income. On the other hand, when I say GST, it is an example of indirect tax. Why it is known as indirect tax? Because here the incidence of tax is not directly on the consumer, because the consumer is ultimately paying tax, but he is not liable to pay tax to the tax department. The person who is selling or transferring or supplying the goods and services, he is liable to pay tax to the government. That's why it is known as indirect tax. So this is what tax and types of tax: direct tax, indirect tax, and why we are paying tax. Let us have a discussion how this income tax, particularly I am saying about income tax, how this income tax evolved in India. This is our history of income tax in India. You know, during British rule, the British government incurred huge loss because of the Sepoy mutiny in 1857, and at that time Sir William James was the British officer who is deputed in India, and he was asked by the British government to recover that loss from the Indian. That's why Sir William James introduced for the first time income tax in India in the year 1860 as an experimental basis, and this experiment continued till 1886. And after that, the first income tax act was passed in India in the year 1886, which continued up to 1918, and the next new act came into force in 1918, and again it was replaced in the year 1922, and this 1922 income tax act continued up to 31st March 1961. That means that income tax act, which was passed in the year 1922, continue even after independence of our country. Then after independence, a bill was passed by the parliament in 1961, and which is applicable in whole of India and came into force with effect from 1st April 1962. And this income tax act consists of 298 sections, 14 schedules, and number of sub rules, and every year, each year, along with the passage of Finance Act, this income tax act is also changes, and accordingly new act, new rules, new schedules, new sections, subsections are being added. Now, what are the pillars of income tax law? When I say pillar, that means what are the source from where this income tax law is being adjudicated or managed, or it is being implemented. The first thing is Income Tax Act 1961. When I say Income Tax Act, it is 1961. The second source from where income tax law gets different rules, that is Annual Finance Act. Every year at the end of the February or beginning of March, the government used to announce there is a budget, and this budget, and in that budget the Finance Act came into force, and that Finance Act consists of number of rules, regulations which is also applicable for taxation purpose. The third important pillar, or third important source is income tax rule, that is 1962. This income tax rule provides us the ways and means how this act can be implemented. And number 4 is your circular and notification. That who will give the circular? Circular and notifications will be given by different tax authority. The highest tax authority in India is Central Board of Direct Tax, the CBDT, and they will give different circulars, notice, notifications, rule, regulations. And the last one is your legal decisions of courts. Legal decision of court, that means many a times there will be number of cases. Legal decisions refers to the different case that has been made by either SSC or to the income, or by the income tax authority, and the decision taken by the judicial system will become a law or rules for income tax adjudications. So these are 5 pillars or 5 sources from where income tax law gets its rules and regulations. Now let us discuss some important concepts, or we can say important terms, which are frequently used in income tax understanding or income tax calculations, or and for understanding the entire law and theories of income tax. The first most important is your assessment year. When I say assessment year, it is section 2 subsection 9. As you know, year normally consists of 12 months. Similarly, assessment year is also consists of 12 months. It is similar to that of financial year, because normally business, or we maintain our accounts or records on the basis of financial year. That's why assessment year is also on the basis of financial year. It starts on 1st April and ends on 31st March of the next year. And for our purpose, current assessment year is 2020 and 2021. That means our assessment year starts on 1st April 2020 and ends on 31st March 2021. Then what is that assessment year normally mean for us? Assessment year is the year in which the income earned during the previous year is being assessed and is taxable. Again I am repeating, assessment year is the year on which the income earned during the previous year is being assessed and tax is paid in the assessment year. Income tax rates is prescribed in each financial year, which will be applicable for a particular assessment year. Next is to understand what is previous year. This is coming under section 3. This is most important, because all rules, regulation rates, whatever we will calculate, that is relating to previous year. So when I say previous year is nothing, it is just the financial year immediately preceding the assessment year. That means it is the income earning year, the year in which income is being earned and tax is to be paid in the assessment year. Now the question arises whether it is 12 months or less than 12 months. It will start from 1st April and ends on 31st March of the next in a normal situation. But in situation where it may be less than 12 months. I will discuss what are the situation where the previous year will be less than 12 months. For our purpose, current previous year is 2019 and 20. That means it will start from 1st April 2019 and ends on 31st March 2020. So as I have discussed, or as I have told you, that previous year is also a financial year which consists of 12 months, but there are situations where this previous year may be less than 12 months. For example, in case of a newly created source of income, suppose Mr. X gets a job on 31st December 2019, 31st December 2019, then its previous year will end on 31st March 2020. In that case, the previous year for Mr. X will consist of only 3 months, that is January, February and March. So in case of a newly created source of income, then previous year may be less than 12 months. Similarly, in case of a newly started business, suppose someone will start a business on 1st July in 2019. In that case, for the income tax point of view, the first previous year will be from 1st July 2019 to 31st March 2020. So how many months? July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. In that case, the previous year will be only of 9 months instead of 12 months. So these are the cases where previous year may be less than year 12 months. Now, as I have told you, the normal rule is the income earned during the previous year is taxable in the assessment year. This is the normal rule, but there are some exceptions where income earned during the previous year is taxable in the same previous year instead of assessment year. Again, I am repeating, income earned in the previous year. For example, income earned during 2019 and 20 will be taxable in the same 19 and 20 instead of it is 20 and 21. What are the cases where this exception will be applicable? Number one is non-resident shipping business. Suppose a foreign ship is coming to India and at the time of returning from India, it carries some goods or cargo of an Indian supplier. In that case, the shipping business, whatever carriage or whatever freight charges is being charged on the Indian supplier, that becomes the income of that non-resident shipping business. In that case, the shipping business has to pay immediately tax at the time of leaving the port instead of waiting for the next assessment year. Similarly, if a person is leaving India with an intention not to return in near future, with an intention not to return return to India in future, in that case, at the time of person leaving India, the income tax department will charge the tax on income earned up to the date of leaving. For example, in near future, in near past, as we know, the Kingfisher, the owner left India. At that time, the government of India or tax authority must have calculated tax amount and must get it charged or get it recovered in the year itself, because the person is leaving India with an intention not to return in future. Similarly, if a particular association or business or firm is being created for a temporary purpose, let's say 2 months, 3 months, in that case, the whatever income that association or firm or partnership will earn during the same year, it has to be taxable in the same year. Similarly, if a person is shifting or transferring his assets in favor of another person with an intention that to avoid tax, in that case, at the time of transferring the assets, the income earned on that assets shall be taxable in the hands of the person who is transferring. Similarly, if a business is discontinued, that means a business will not continue further, dissolve, wind up. In that case, the tax is to be paid on the date of dissolutions or on the date of wind up instead of waiting to the next assessment year. So these are the cases where the income earned during the previous year shall be taxable in the same previous year instead of waiting for the coming assessment year. The next important uh, term which will create confusion in the minds of the user or in students or even in practitioner, that person, because there are two terms we simultaneously use, person and assessee. When I say person, but who are the persons? Persons includes a long list, but the definition whatever given in section 2 subsection 31, it is not an inclusive it is an inclusive definition, it is not an exhaustive definition. When I say it is an inclusive definition, that means whatever that is being defined under this section will come under person, and whatever not defined in this section, if they are defined anywhere else or is coming under other purview, that they are also be considered as persons. So when I say person, it includes individuals, that means natural human being. It includes Hindu undivided family, HUF, firms, partnership firms, LLP, limited liability partnership firms, AOP and BOI, association of persons, body of individuals. Let me give an example. When I say association of persons, cooperative is a best example of association of persons, where persons get together and do business for their own mutual benefits. Similarly, body of individuals, like your club is an association or body of individuals get together to form a club. Now, what is the major difference between AOP and BOI? In case of BOI, only individuals can be a member. On the other hand, in case of AOP, the individual can be a member, at the same time any other persons like individual, HUA, firm, company can also be a member. Next is your company or corporate sector, any legal entity, local authority like municipality, college, school, artificial judicial persons, High Court, Supreme Court, or any other government office. So these are all persons. Now coming to assessee. As I have told you that there is a clear-cut distinction between person and assessee. Assessee is coming under section 2 subsection 7. Then who are assessee? A person by whom income tax or any sum of money is payable under the Income Tax Act is termed as assessee. That assessee may be any person. Remember that the person may be an individual, may be a body of individual, may be AOP, may be firm, may be corporate, anybody, any person by whom some income tax or any sum of money payable under this act will be termed as assessee. However, it includes three categories of assessee. Who are the three categories of assessee? Number one is ordinary assessee. When I say ordinary assessee, it does not mean that he is an ordinary person. Ordinary assessee means persons whose income is above exempted limit. That means this exempted limit is applicable for non-corporate assessee. So any non-corporate persons, if his income is above exempted limit, they will be considered as ordinary assessee. Or any person who has sustained some loss and wants to take the benefit of that loss in future income, he is also considered as ordinary assessee. Similarly, any person by whom any tax, penalty, interest, fees payable under this act, when I say under this act means Income Tax Act, he will be considered as ordinary assessee. Similarly, any person who is eligible to get refund from Income Tax Department will also be considered as ordinary assessee. For example, suppose a senior citizen having no income but has some deposits in bank. Suppose 10 lakh rupees deposit in bank, and the interest amount comes to 1,10,000, out of which 10,000 interest has been deducted as DDS by the bank. In that case, the senior citizen is eligible to get back that 10,000 refund from the Income Tax Department. That's why that senior citizen, even if his income is below exemption limit, he will become an ordinary assessee. And last but not the least, any person against whom some proceedings has been initiated by the Income Tax Department. Whether he is liable to pay tax or not, it is immaterial. If some proceedings has been initiated by income tax department, he will be considered as your ordinary assessee. So this is what one category of assessee. Second category of assessee is known as a deemed to be assessee or representative assessee. When I say deemed to be assessee, actually he is not an assessee, but for income tax point of view, he will be considered as an assessee. For example, the income earned by a minor child, as is not measured till now, that's why he is not liable or eligible to pay tax to the income tax authority. On the other hand, his parents or legal guardian will be responsible or liable to pay tax on the income earned by that minor child. In that case, that legal representative or your parents will be considered as your representative assessee. And the third category of assessee is known as assessee in default. This is very peculiar type of assessee. Actually, this is not an assessee, but he will be considered as an assessee only when he default or only when he fails to discharge the statutory duty imposed on them. For example, when an employer is making payment of salary, it is the duty of the employer to deduct tax from the salary amount and deposit in government account. If the employer fails to deduct tax from the salary or deduct tax, fails to deposit in government account, in that situation he will be considered as assessee in default. Here the employer will be considered as assessee in default. Similarly, suppose a person is required to pay advance tax and he fails to pay advance tax or pay, but there is a shortage of installment of payment of advance tax, then also he will be considered as your assessee in default. Accordingly, the penalty will be imposed under section 234 B and C, A, B, C, 234 A, B, C. So this is all about the assessee. Again, I am repeating, all persons are not assessee, but all assessees are persons. Assessee includes all these persons, maybe individual, maybe partnership, maybe firm, if they come under these three categories. Next important term is income. This is the most difficult and undefined term in income tax. Income tax is purely based on this term income, whereas this term is not clearly defined in income tax. For a normal human being or from a normal point of view, when I say income, anything which comes into the pocket of the assessee or person from outside will be considered as income. Income, anything which is coming to our pocket will be considered as income. But this is not the definition which is given in Income Tax Act. In section 2, subsection 24, the definition is an exemplary definition. That means this definition is an inclusive definition, not an exhaustive definition. It includes lot of things which will be considered as your income. Now, instead of defining the term income, it has given some features of income which will help us whether a particular money or particular things which comes to the assessee pocket will be considered as income or not. These are the features of a particular term income. Income should be regular. That means if a person is getting salary from employer every month, it will be considered as income. If a person is getting salary only for one day, that doesn't mean that it is not regular, it is not income. It will also be considered as income. Similarly, income must come from a definite source. For example, if someone is getting the rent, that means the source is the tenant is giving the rent. So there must be some source from where the income must come from. Then income may be in different forms. That means income is not required always in cash. It may be in kind. For example, someone is doing some work. Instead of getting money in return, he may get foods, he may get clothes, he may get some furniture. In that case also, the price equivalent of that kinds will be considered as income. Similarly, income may be on due basis, on receipt basis. That means suppose a person has discharged or has undertaken a particular job and his job is over, but he is not yet paid. That doesn't mean that he has no income. As the work is over, the amount is due. That due amount can also be considered as income. Similarly, the income has nothing to do with the legality of the income. That means whether you are earning money by legal means or illegal means, all are income and you are bound to pay tax on both the income. Similarly, in case of disputed ownership, suppose Mr. X has a property and after expiry of, the death of X, Mr. X has two son Y and Z, and then till now it is not decided who will be the owner of the property. In that case, whatever rent or derived from that property will be considered as income in the hands of the son who is actually receiving that rent. That means even if the ownership is disputed, but the person who is actually enjoying the money will be considered as a deemed owner, and accordingly income will be taxable in his hand. Similarly, reimbursement of expenses will not be considered as income. Let me give an example. Suppose Mr. X is working in Reliance company at Mumbai. Now Reliance company will send Mr. X to Delhi for a particular purpose, and for that purpose Mr. X incurred suppose 10,000 extra expenditures, and Reliance company reimburse the 10,000 to Mr. X. In that case, this 10,000 is not considered as income, because this is simply reimbursement of the expenses which is incurred by Mr. X on behalf of the company or on behalf of the employer. Similarly, your surplus for mutual activities is also not considered as your income. Suppose we get together and contribute 100 rupees each, and it comes around 500 rupees. With that 500 rupees, we purchase some foods and make a feast, and after the completion of that feast, suppose till 100 rupees surplus will be there, we cannot say that 100 rupees is our income. This is simply the surplus from our mutual contributions. The most important thing is surrender of income and foregoing of income. Listen, when I say surrender of income, this is not an income, but when I say foregoing of income, it is an income. Let me give a simple example. Suppose Mr. X has his monthly salary 50,000 and it surrender under the act that 30,000 salary will be surrendered to Government of India. Then in every month he will get 20,000 salary and his income will be 20,000, not 50,000. On the other hand, suppose Mr. X will forego that I will not take 30,000 rupees. In that case, the salary, even if he is taking 20,000, it will be considered as 50,000 salary, and his income will be considered as 50,000. Similarly, real income and notional income. Income should always be real. That means 100 rupees from one pocket and enter into another pocket of the same person will not be considered as your income. Your income should be real, it should come from outside. House property of Mr. X uses his own house property for his business. In that case, he cannot say that the rent which he would have paid to outsider will be considered as his income. It will not be considered as income. Similarly, PIN money. As you know, what is PIN money? PIN money is nothing. It is the money which is given by the husband to the wife for meeting the day-to-day expenses of pocket money. That PIN money will not be considered as an income. Double taxation provisions are not available or applicable in India. In India, a particular income is taxable once. It is not taxable twice. Awards and prizes. It is also coming under income, but here you have to see whether awards and prizes are given for what purpose and awards and prizes are given to whom. And if, so for example, the awards given to the national award like Parambir Chakra awards, these are given for national interest, these are exempted, these are not income. Prizes given by the school to its student for encouraging their act, it will not be considered as their income. Similarly, gifts means any money or assets which are given by one person to another person without any consideration or with inadequate consideration will be considered as gift, and it will be also taxable subject to some exemptions. Similarly, negative income, this is most important and most interesting. Income, what is negative income? Negative income means losses. So how can a loss be considered as income? Yes, loss is also considered as income. How? When we have income, we are paying tax. When we have loss, the government should supposed to pay us tax, but actually government will not pay us tax. Indirectly government will pay us tax. If a person is sustaining some losses in business, it can file a return sustaining that, displaying that he has incurred some losses, and in that year he is not required to pay any taxes. Similarly, in the next year, when the same person is earning some income from the business, out of that business income, this loss which is being displayed in the last year can be adjusted. Now the remaining balance amount income will be considered for tax calculation purpose. So this is how loss is also known as your negative income or losses. And the last important feature is your tax-free income. When I say tax-free income, it doesn't mean that on this income tax is not required to pay. When I say tax-free income, it means that tax on a particular income is being paid by the person who is giving you the income. For example, Mr. X is working in a company where his salary is 50,000. Let's say monthly salary 50,000. Then yearly salary will be 6 lakh. On 6 lakh, let's say total tax amount comes to 60,000, and the Mr. X is supposed to pay 60,000 every year as a tax. Whereas on behalf of Mr. X, suppose the company is paying 60,000 tax to the government. In that case, that salary income 6 lakh is known as your tax-free income. However, that doesn't mean that Mr. X is not required to pay any tax. Mr. X will pay tax not only on 6 lakh but also on 60,000 tax which is paid by the employer. That means in that previous year, his total income will be considered as 6,60,000, on which suppose tax amount comes to 66,000, then 60,000 has been paid by the employer. Now Mr. X is required to pay balance 6,000 tax to the government of India. That type of salary or that type of income is known as tax-free income. The next important term is your gross total income. When I say gross total income, that means that this is coming under heads of income or sources of income. Whatever income a particular person will have or earn, that will come under the 5 different heads, which is given in section 14. What are the 5 heads? Either it will be a salary income, or it will be your income from house property, rental income, or it will be business or professional gains or profits, or it will be capital gain on transfer of capital assets, or if a particular income doesn't fall under the above 4 category, it will be considered as your income from other source or residual income. Now, aggregate of these 5, salary, house property, PGBP, capital gain and income from other sources, if we add these 5, this will be termed as your gross total income. Remember, if we add these 5, it will be considered as gross total income. When out of this aggregate 5, if we deduct the permissible deductions available under section 80, permissible deduction available under section 80, then the balancing figure will be known as your taxable income or total income. Next important term we use will be maximum marginal rate of tax. This is very simple. The highest rate of income tax, including surcharge and cess, applicable to an assessee in a previous year. As we know, in India, for non-corporate assessee, the progressive rate of tax are applicable. What is progressive rate? that means up to a particular income tax is nil. Then from that above a particular rate will be applicable. As and when the income goes on increasing, the tax rate also goes on increasing. Similarly, cess also goes on increasing, surcharge also goes on increasing. That's why it is known as the highest progressive rate of tax. For example, an individual below the age of 60, the current year tax rate is from income 0 to 2,50,000, tax rate is nil. From 2,50,000 to 5,00,000 it will be 5%. Then 5,00,000 to 10,00,000 it will be 20%. Then above 10,00,000 it will be your 30%. Similarly, surcharge is applicable if your gross total income is above 50 lakhs, then it will be 10%, then again 15%, 25%, 37%. Highest surcharge is 37% where the income exceeds 5 crores. And similarly, cess is applicable 4% in aggregate. Now, if we calculate the highest rate of tax such as cess, that rate will be considered as your maximum marginal rate of tax. So it is obvious that it will vary from person to person, from case to case or year to year, because every year tax rate is being changed, every year cess is changed, every year surcharge is being changed, and again the different persons have different tax rate applicable to them. For example, in our previous year 1920, the MMR for an individual will be maximum rate tax rate is 30%, then maximum surcharge will be 37%, then maximum cess will be 4%, so MMR will be 42.74%. So this is all about the conceptual words or terms which are used in our income tax law. Then we will discuss some fundamental things about the planning, avoidance and evasions. Before I make you understand the concept of planning, avoidance and evasion, let's see this diagram. Tax planning, tax avoidance and tax evasions are interrelated. Let me give an example. Suppose in a traffic square, the light color is green and you are free to go. Suppose the light color is orange, then you have to wait and see whether someone is coming or not. If no one is coming, you can go still, but there is a risk. Suppose the light color, traffic light color is red, then you must wait. When the road will be clear, then you are supposed to go. But instead of waiting, suppose you cross the road, then by luck you may cross the road or you may make an accident. So this is an example of tax planning, tax avoidance, tax evasion. When the light is green, that means it's a tax planning, as you have to do all as per rules and regulations, and you are free to do. When tax avoidance, when the light is orange, that means there is a rule still. Then if you can escape, then you can go. And when the light is red, that is tax evasion, because these rules are prohibiting you, still then you are doing. If you catch hold, then it will endanger you and it is penalized. Now, from tax planning point of view, when I say tax planning means paying tax is always painful, because when you have to pay something from your pocket, it will always pinch to your hand. So everyone is interested not to pay tax, but not to pay tax, there are 3 different means through which you can reduce your tax liability. So the most thing which is allowable in the Income Tax Act is known as tax planning. Let me give a comparative analysis of tax planning and tax avoidance. So as I have discussed, meaning if it is an arrangement of one financial affairs in such a way that the burden of the taxation on the assessee is reduced to its minimum without violating any of the legal provisions. The important thing is you have to do all your activities, arrangement of your financial activities within the core frame of your legal rules and provisions. But tax avoidance, by taking the advantages of the loopholes or colorable devices, That means where there is a defect or there is a loopholes in the system, you will take the benefit of that. Tax planning is a wider concept. It includes tax management, whereas tax avoidance is a very narrow concept, and that means it involves dogging of tax law. That means you have to find out the shortcomings of tax law. Tax planning, it is optional to all the assessees, but advisable you must do because you want to reduce your tax liability. Tax avoidance, it is not at all advisable, but it is a criminal. It is not a criminal offence. Like tax evasion, tax avoidance is not a criminal offence. Effect in tax planning, transactions are real and natural, but in case of avoidance, the tax avoidance transactions are artificial or colorable, or you are doing with an intention to reduce the tax liability within the framework of the provisions by taking the benefits of the shortcomings of the income tax law. Let me again distinguish between your tax planning and tax evasion. You see, tax evasion is an arrangement of one financial affairs in such a way that to reduce the tax liability illegally, illegitimate manner. It is illegal, illegitimate. It is by adopting unfair means, and it is always prohibited, and it is penalized, and it involves misrepresentation of the fact, and it will not help our country to grow. So these are the fundamental concepts which will be used in income tax law and practices. Besides this, you have to remember some important terms like tax rate, cess, surcharge, which I have already discussed. These are also going to be used in our forthcoming sessions. If you have any doubt, you can visit my YouTube channel, or you can also view any of your books, because fundamentals are remain unchanged. You can have any books, old book or new books, or notes which are available in our university websites. Thank you. Stay at home. Stay safe.